formal agreement with the Conservatives to avoid an election?
No.
No, there's no formal deal. What's happening is what our leader, Pierre Poilievre, committed to right after the election. After 10 years of Liberal government, costs are out of control, crime is out of control, inflationary deficits have pushed up the cost of virtually everything, and criminals run free in our streets because of Liberal easy bail. We said right from the get-go, if the Liberals want to address these areas that we've been fighting for the past few years, we would allow legislation to pass that at the very least did no further harm.
When you get 13 premiers in a room, politics comes up, and politics of every type comes up. That came up, but that's going to be up to the Prime Minister. It's going to be up to the people to decide. If they do decide to call an election, has nothing to do with me.
Pierre Poilievre reached out at all again for advice, or have you been chatting to him at all?
No, not at all. But that's all right. The people are going to decide at the end of the day.
Reaction there to the possibility of an election anytime soon. As you heard earlier from Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, both Liberals and Conservatives are going out of their way, all of a sudden it appears, to avoid one. What's going on? Let's bring back our front bench. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. Laura, I'll start with you because we could hear your lovely voice asking about all the conversations that are not happening between Pierre Poilievre and Doug Ford. I have to say, like, I just interviewed Andrew Scheer not too long ago. I was like blown away at how different it was than many previous interviews in, like, the tone in particular he was taking to the subject of collaboration. Like, what do you think is going on?
I think it's pretty obvious that the Conservatives don't want an election, and neither do the Liberals, quite frankly, it seems, at this point in time. But I don't think it's as kind of benevolent or altruistic as both sides are making it out to seem. I mean, the Conservatives seem to be giving the government space, and I believe they're choosing to do so because they believe that Mr. Carney will fail or in their view, continue to let Canadians down. But they need time to do that, right? I mean, Pierre Poilievre just came off of his leadership review. He was obviously focused on winning that by a large majority, which he did. But, the polls don't look good for Mr. Poilievre, at least on a personal level right now. Mr. Carney, while he seems to be doing well in public opinion polling, I mean, it's still a huge risk to go to the public. You need a compelling reason in order to call an election. And he has portrayed himself as a serious person at a very important time, and to sort of put that on pause at a very difficult moment for Canada to head to the polls. I think that could be a tough sell, although we've seen it before with prime example, Doug Ford, and you could see there that, he clearly talked about this among the other premiers, as we reported with the Prime Minister. So I think that everyone has their own best interests at heart here, and they don't believe that now is the best time for either of them to go to an election. We'll see if the Liberals end up changing their minds, though, because we at least know that it's being discussed at the highest levels of power in this country.
I do find it interesting that they've arrived at this consensus view now, Larissa, because a lot of the same conditions existed before Christmas when they weren't taking this view, right? Like, the polling was still not great for the leader of the Conservative Party. The Liberals still needed a reason to go to the electorate, but they were much more, everyone tells me behind the scenes, pro the prospect of an election than they are now. What do you think has tangibly changed between then and now?
I don't think much has changed, and we'll remember after the last federal election, Pierre Poilievre paraphrased an Abraham Lincoln quote that I will stand with a man when he's right, I will part with him when he's wrong. There isn't anything glaringly wrong that the Conservatives could say, convince the public that they have to force an election. And let's be honest here, it's really the government that has to decide to go to an election. The Conservatives can't really force the government to go to an election. If I was a Liberal strategist, I'd want to go before the NDP sort of rose from the ashes, right? The way electoral math and election math works is that the Liberals have a much greater chance of winning a majority or doing well in an election if there's nobody on their left flank. And that's what happened in the last election. election. That's how election math worked in Mark Carney's favor and against Pierre Poilievre. That election math would likely work again if the NDP hasn't sort of figured out, where they stand on a bunch of things and elect a new leader. So if I was a Liberal, I would say go now. But the Conservatives rightly are reading the room and saying and thinking it's not what the public wants. And I actually think Mark Carney, who isn't a hyper-partisan, is more likely to want to solve the nation's problems than benefit politically. So he's probably fighting with his party leadership on that one.
What do you think's going on, Kathleen?
Well, we can talk about the election speculation and why no one wants an election right now. We did that on Question Period on your show on Sunday. But I would actually want to address something else. Listen, cooperation is not a bad thing. It should happen. That's why people elect minority governments, because they want people to work together. But it is the hypocrisy right now of the Conservatives that is killing me. Because for literally 3 years, they railed against New Democrats who had a transparent, very clear, cooperative deal that delivered tangible results for Canadians. And they said that that was, the worst thing that could ever happen to Canadians, that there was some kind of, evil coalition that was happening. And now the Conservatives are literally plotting in rooms with the Prime Minister some kind of cooperation, and it's fine now. So it's the hypocrisy that kills me. I think parties should cooperate. I think they should work to get Parliament and legislation through. But right now, when I see Mr. Scheer or when I see, Mr. Poilievre in those meetings, basically trying desperately to avoid an election. And I appreciate Larissa's very strong communication skills in trying to spin it about the Liberals. But I'm sorry, it's the Conservatives that don't want an election right now. And truthfully, New Democrats don't want an election right now because, newsflash, we don't have a leader. But, the reality is that, the Liberals are in the best position to actually secure a majority. And frankly, if they went to an election and the Conservatives lost again, which would be their fourth, fifth loss in a row, Pierre Poilievre as leader would not be able to stand anymore. And that would mean the fragmentation of that coalition, very strong coalition that he himself, as Conservative leader, has built.
It is interesting, though, that what the Conservatives did find very unpalatable previously, right? Because of, I think, a number of reasons, but primarily their politics being different than the Prime Minister at the time and the leader of the NDP, is now palatable because the politics of the Conservatives and the Liberals are not as misaligned as they were under the last government. What are your thoughts on how this continues to evolve or unfold, Dan?
Well, certainly what we're seeing from the Conservatives is about the public opinion polling. We can't ignore that. I think all the rest of the panelists have talked about it at length. The public polling environment has shifted dramatically. The Conservatives do not want an election right now. Watching Andrew Scheer on your program, that is not a man who wants an election. It's very clear in everything he said there that there's no interest in going that route. What I do think this is also reflective of the long-promised tone shift in how Pierre Poilievre was going to approach Parliament and how he's going to approach his leadership. I think the Conservatives are looking to communicate a more constructive approach in amending and supporting, where appropriate, the government's agenda. I think they want to demonstrate to Canadians that they can get things done, that they can work with the government where they feel it's appropriate. And I think that's what is being communicated here, is a different kind of approach for Mr. Poilievre now that he's on the other side of his leadership review. Conservative strategists have been talking about this for quite some time, and I think we're starting to see it in action. It is undermined, however, by the public opinion polling, because in this environment in which the Conservatives do look very weak in the minds of Canadians, and if there was an election, Kathleen's right, the Liberals would almost certainly win a majority, it doesn't exactly support moments like the one where you've got Andrew Scheer here and he's trying to explain why they're doing this in any other context than trying to avoid an election.
Laura, what do you think about it? I totally take the point that Dan's making. And I take the public opinion polling. And I will point out it's varied, right? You've got something like Leger, which shows a big gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives. You have Nanos and Angus Reid, for example, which shows a much smaller gap. But it's the first time in the past few weeks that we've seen any of the pollsters kind of head towards a trend line of a bigger gap. What are your thoughts on the way that might be informing this? And also, I don't know if it's a guarantee that, like you said, it's a risk, right? They may think a majority is in sight, the Liberals, but there's no guarantee of that. I recall covering a few previous elections in 2019 and 2021 when that was supposed to materialize and didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Elections are hard work. Things can change. Events happen during elections that can then fundamentally shift what they're about. And I mean, Mark Carney is a political neophyte, right? I'm not sure he gets his kicks from doing politics maybe in the way that Pierre Poilievre does. And Poilievre is an experienced campaigner. It obviously didn't go his way last time, but he was able to break through in some key areas in the GTA in Southern Ontario, for instance. So, you know, I'm not sure that Mr. Carney is kind of licking his chops, hoping to get back on the Huskings. That said, he will have to at some point eventually. But I mean, I just think this will take kind of a lot of planning and thought on the part of both parties, but certainly from the Liberals, if they are playing this. I mean, this is going to take a lot of work to kind of map out what this election is about, you know, all the campaign stops, everything like that. I mean, this doesn't come together in an afternoon. So clearly conversations are happening, and they're you know, even if they're casual, as we heard through our reporting or through the premiers and others, but it's not something you would do in a split moment. And I'm not sure the polls are so definitive that Mark Carney would be absolutely handed a majority were an election to happen.
What do you think ultimately would prompt the rest of the Liberals to make that decision?
Oh, I think it will be convincing Mark Carney that this is his moment. And again, I don't think Mark Carney is a hyper-partisan who would want to seize that opportunity at this moment. What would have to convince him is just definitive polling, and things would have to calm down with the United States. I don't see either of those things happening. Mark Carney, to me, doesn't feel like somebody who's going to take a lot of risk and isn't going to go into something that he can't give 100% of his attention to. He's not somebody who seems to take on big projects like that off the side of his desk. And there's still a lot of trust to be built between, I think, Liberal Party leadership and the Prime Minister. Remember, he just became Liberal Party leader, so there's going to be a lot of convincing. I don't see that happening this spring, but I could be proven wrong.
Dan, what do you think ultimately? Like, is it necessarily that things with Trump calm down, or the converse that could provide the question to put to the electorate?
Well, I'll sort of put it back to you a different way. I think there's two things that could create there's circumstances for an election this spring, which I do agree is, I think, the least likely path forward. I think we're going to have a handful of by-elections in a few weeks, and that'll probably be the only elections that happen before the summer. But I think there are two things that could happen. One, you could have the domestic environment shift. You could have this constructive tone at Parliament be very short-lived, and Parliament could be presented as dysfunctional again by the government, and they could say, look, this isn't working for us. We've got to deal with a very problematic set of macroeconomic challenges, and we need a new mandate from Canadians, and the Prime Minister could request an election. That's one scenario. The other is external factors, in which Donald Trump and the USMCA negotiation creates such instability and so many problems for the government that the Prime Minister is actually in a position where he says, yeah, you know what, I have to go to an election in order to have a new mandate. And both of those circumstances, just to be clear, are underpinned by the fact that the public opinion polling is trending in one direction, which is very favorable for the governing party and the Liberals.
I've got 30 seconds left. They're all yours, Kathleen.
Yeah, I would just say I think it's the rupture of the USMCA negotiations that would probably trigger an election if it was to happen, and that could be fall, or it could be in early 2027 post the Quebec election, provincial election, which is expected later this year.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Kathleen Monk, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, and Laura Stone, our wonderful front bench.